Welcome back. Coming up in just a moment, Dave Kindred. We had this discussion yesterday about Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese, the current series on PBS by, who's again?
Ken Burns.
Oh, yeah, Ken Burns. I forget. And who says in his story, in his piece, according to ESPN here now, I'm only quoting what they said, is that this so-called embrace that Pee Wee Reese gave Jackie Robinson at a ball game when he first came aboard and was playing as the first African-American in baseball never happened. So I checked around and talked to a friend of mine, Dave Kindred, who is, of course, a gifted writer from Golf Digest, author, and a guy who knew Pee Wee Reese. And this is what Dave's column said when he filed it years ago. He said, regarding embrace, most likely it never happened at the time, and in their retirements, Robinson and Reese never mentioned embrace. There is no photograph of such a moment, and no teammate described it. Still, something happened. Of that, there's no doubt. In 2005, at the unveiling of the Brooklyn statue, Robinson's wife, Rachel, told Ira Burko of the New York Times, "I remember Jackie talking about Pee Wee's gesture the day it happened. It came as such a relief to him that a teammate and a captain of the team would go out of his way," and Pee Wee was the captain, "his way in such a fashion to express friendship." In Arlo Rampersad's biography, Jackie Robinson recalled a moment, but not an embrace. Pee Wee kind of sensed a sort of helplessness, dead feeling in me, and came over and stood beside me for a while. He didn't say a word, but he looked over at the chaps who were yelling at me and just stared. He was standing by me, I could tell you that. And this is what I recall Robinson talking about and Reese talking about in regards to their relationship, about them standing together. There was even a joke at one point. I remember, this might be poor taste now, but Pee Wee said, my teammates asked me if maybe I should put shoe polish on my face or something along those lines, and they laughed about it then. They couldn't laugh about it today. In 1997, Reese told the New York Times, something in my gut reacted at that moment. Something about what? The unfairness of it? The injustice of it? I don't know. Whatever happened, maybe it happened in Cincinnati, maybe it happened in Boston. It could have happened anywhere in the late 1940s when Jim Crow laws and customs divided Americans. In 42, the movie about Robinson, it happens at Cincinnati's Crosley Field in 1947. Reese, portrayed as a Southern innocent, if not yokel, complains to the Dodgers boss, Branch Rickey, about a letter threatening him if he plays alongside Robinson. Anyway, that's Dave Kindred's column. I believe we have Mr. Kindred on the line now. And with that, I'll say welcome to my good friend and the gifted writer, Dave Kindred. Dave, it's nice to talk to you again.
Thank you, buddy. It's a pleasure. Just don't call me Mr. Kindred
again. Anita is very well trained, isn't she?
Yes,
to do
she
that.
Did well. Thank you.
Yeah, she's. I got so much to talk to you about. I'll never get it all in, but let's just start with the Pee Wee Reese relationship that you had. And the way I thought it was going to go down was that they were going to kind of indicate or implicate that there was no Robinson Reese relationship, that they didn't have a friendship. This is the ESPN story. This is cursory now. And I thought, well, if that's the case, I know that wasn't true because I personally heard them both speak in New York. I know they talked about it. This is over a so-called embrace, or as you put it out, or whatever it was, and now you've cleared that up. David, can you give me your version? I just read your column when it referred to your version of that so-called embrace and your version of their relationship, Jackie Robinson and, of course, the white captain of the Dodgers, Pee Wee Reese from Louisville, where you used to work.
I should begin, buddy, by saying that I knew Pee Wee in retirement in Louisville, played golf with him dozens of times, knew him well, talked to him about Robinson often. They were friends. They were at first rivals for the shortstop job. That was Reese's first reaction to the news that Robinson had been signed. Not that a black man had been signed, but that a shortstop had been signed while Pee Wee was in the Navy for 3 years during World War II. They became friends because they both were great competitors. They both had the same thing in mind. They wanted to win. As for the embrace, I talked to Pee Wee a lot about that relationship. He never once mentioned an embrace. I'm not sure I ever asked him the direct question, but I certainly gave him dozens of opportunities to talk about it. He did tell me the only story that he told me about that kind of relationship involved an exhibition game in 1947, Robinson's rookie year in Atlanta. The exhibition was in Atlanta. Robinson received a letter saying that he would be killed if he showed up on the field. They're warming up, Robinson and Reese side by side, and the way Pee Wee told the story to me was that he said, "Jackie, would you move away from me a little bit? The guy might be a bad shot." That's the only story that Pee Wee ever told me that has anything to do with, a black-white relationship. Everything else was competitors. The last time I talked to Pee Wee was 1997, shortly before he died, and he said, "Dave, you know the stories better than I do. Just write them." And again, he never told me about an embrace. No one witnessed it. I found no outside witness. I found no pictures of it. It's one of those things that has become bigger the longer we get away from it. There are pictures of Pee Wee with an arm around Robinson. Most of those happen in the dugout or in the clubhouse, but there's no record of Pee Wee walking across the field, as it was said, to embrace Jackie at first base in a public display that would have settled, that became famous. I don't think it happened. If it had happened, I think Pee Wee would have told me it happened.
I do remember, now that you talked about it, the comment about the death threat. I remember Pee Wee talking about that, and I remember that quote. Now that you told me, reminded me of it, he did talk about that. "Get away from me, the guy might be a bad shot." I remember that levity part.
And Pee Wee, as I said in that column, was no yokel. Pee Wee was a man of the world. He'd been in the Navy for 3 years. He'd been an all-star shortstop in the National League when Robinson was still in the minor leagues, maybe even playing in Kansas City, probably at Montreal. And he knew Robinson to be a prospect, and that was his only concern was his job. He was coming back from the Navy. No jobs were guaranteed to anybody, let alone Major League Baseball players, and especially with competition like Robinson. So I think that they became friends because they had the same goal. They both wanted to be world champions. The Dodgers had never done that. Finally did it with Pee Wee and Robinson in '55.
Well, I appreciate you clearing up. My only concern was this, and sometimes I guess it's the product of old age. Congratulations on your birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
You're about catching me. And I do get concerned when I read things I know for a fact are really distorted and revised, history being revised. And I do remember Pee Wee talking about that relationship. My concern was I didn't know whether it was an embrace or not. I thought I remembered them saying there was. I do know that both of them talked about their affection as friends for each other. And I thought the story on ESPN sort of implied maybe that wasn't there and this whole thing might have been made up. That was my concern. So now
I don't think there's any doubt that they were friends. I don't think there's any doubt of that.
Yeah. Dave, I'm going to switch gears on you because I got you just for about 2 more minutes here, and I want to talk about your column that you had on the first tee in Augusta with the 3 great ones, Arnold Palmer, the King, Jack Nicklaus, and Gary Player, which I thought was one of your best pieces you've ever written from Augusta. And I've read a lot of them that you've written from Augusta. I posted on my Facebook page, and I got a lot of reaction from people who said thank you, and how you were able to capture that moment perfectly, and in that moment you were able to tell the history of why these guys were important. So job well done there. I'm sure you got lots and lots of response from it.
Well, that was, as one of my friends say, low-hanging fruit. I mean, if you couldn't write Arnold Palmer on the first tee at Augusta for the last time, you should turn in your computer or something. It was a great moment. I mean, I've been going to Augusta. That was my 50th Masters.
Yeah, you had a bunch of them.
I remember seeing Jock Hutchinson and Freddie McLeod play off the first tee. Later, joined by Gene Sarazen.
I remember seeing Gene Sarazen off the first tee.
So I've seen plenty of those ceremonies. I always make it a point to be there because I think one of the charms of Augusta, one of the charms of the Masters, is its embrace of history. It's not as if it's a new event every year with a different name and a different place and a different sponsor. It has a longevity that lends some richness to it. And certainly Palmer, Player, and Nicklaus are, what have they won? 6, 4, 3, 13 Masters championships, Masters titles. So it was a great moment. And with Arnold, it might be the last time we see him there. Gary Player even said that. And so it was a moment that I felt, I mean, I'm old enough to have been there, not when Palmer won. He last won there in 64. My first Masters was 67. But he was still a contender. He was still a fighter for the first 10 years that I was there. So I've written about him in his prime, and now I've written about him at probably the last time I'll see him in person.
For sure. Listen, I got 1 minute before the computer cuts me off. I want to say today, you know what today is? What happened in 1997 on this day?
No.
Tiger Woods won his first Masters by
was there.
12 strokes. You were there. I was there. And here I'm reading the Time Magazine interview, and I couldn't resist repeating this quote, amazing quote. He was asked, do you watch golf? Tiger says, I can't remember the last time I watched golf. I can't stand it. Unless one of my friends has a chance to win, then I like watching it. I watched Jason Day and win the PGA, but it was on mute. It's always on mute, and I have some other game on other TV. That kind of shocks me. What about you?
This is a quote from last week.
Tiger Woods, just most recently.
Yeah. Well, it's no surprise to people who believe that Tiger only cared about Tiger to begin with.
Yes, I think Dan Jenkins would echo that sentiment as well. David, we're up against the time of the clock. They're going to cut us off in a mid-sentence, but thank you so much for being all the best to Cheryl, by the way.
Thanks,
and
buddy.
Let's talk about your next book next time we get on. I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Thank you much for that. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Dave Kindred, one of the truly gifted men of letters in our. If it's literature and sports, Dave Kindred writes. On the other side, we'll talk more about what's going on in the world of sports otherwise, and what about Tiger, right here on
1370 AM, 96.3 FM, WOCA, The Source.
Your quality of life is meant to be fully enjoyed each day. The doctors at Ayers Global understand that and strive to provide a quality of life for you that has no equal. Ayers Therapeutic Services combines naturopathic and family medicine to help all your health needs.